Hi, my name is Ken Lasseson. This is an introduction to people who are starting to read Autism Microbiome, which is a blog which I have. It's one of several. A second one, which is much older, is called Chronic CFS Remission, where I talk about my experience. Both of these conditions I'm familiar with. In terms of autism, I had a child had autism. I never started to learn to speak until I was 9 years old. I had a fair number of the classic characteristics of autism, but this was in the day 70 years ago, where autism was unknown to family doctors and generally unknown in most research circles. So the result was it was a mystery diagnosis. Cause was quite likely that both my parents were in their mid 40s when I was born, which of course means high incidence of autism. But I happen to be a high functioning autistic person and exploited the hyper focus which often comes with autism to excel in activities that did not involve social contact, which was mathematics, physics, general science. And the result was I was successful because I basically avoid things that require social contact and focus on things which I was good at and which seems to come naturally with autism. Chronic fatigue syndrome on the other side, I've had 4 times in terms of full-blown cases from work or disability. Saw my bachelor's degree totally blow up on me from the first incident and onwards, 2 of which were caused by right treatment, but probably incorrect diagnosis. First one was antibiotic resistant walking pneumonia, so the doctor had me on alternating antibiotics. Second one was assumed a occult rickettsia-like infection, which was again the treatment was rotating antibiotics. The third and fourth times were handled differently because I started to realize from readings that there was a keep it simple model of what chronic fatigue syndrome was, which could be treated without antibiotics. Not a simple procedure for treating, but totally treatable if you have enough cognitive brain cells together or a loved one has enough together to be able to follow through with a progressive stepwise thing, which is highly individual. Okay, let's get back to both of them. Both of those ended up producing a site called Microbiome Analysis for patients. My experience, personal experience, plus a lot of reading has caused me to believe that a large number of symptoms for a large number of conditions are caused by a dysfunction of the microbiotes or the chemicals in the body. In other words, they get out of whack and you have problems. A very easy one to understand is if suddenly you have too much histamine being produced, then you're suddenly allergic to everything and you respond to things you used to not respond to before. But it goes just beyond that one, but it goes across the spectrum for many things. For example, a lean mouse who keeps the same food, the same eating habits exactly, but gets the gut bacteria transferred from a fat mouse, suddenly becomes fat. Not from overeating or doing anything else, just because the bacteria in the gut change, which means the chemicals being produced and circulating through the body changes, and voila, you have a fat mouse with no change of diet. On the flip side, we have in a human case, we have weight gain after somebody did a fecal matter transplant, a human in this case, and suddenly the person ends up having uncontrollable weight gain, maintaining the same diet. So it is a illustration of one of many cases where a change of gut bacteria causes a change. It could be things like migraines, it could be things such as fatigue, it could be things such as weight gain, blood pressure. Go through the list, and it ends pretty massive list of things where we have found that there is a shift of the microbiome connected with symptoms or with the disease. Of course, the question arises, is the disease a result of the microbiome change, or is the microbiome change a result of the disease? Actually, I say forget it. I'm looking at symptoms and the microbiome. Forget about what disease we are involved in. The symptoms are being driven by the microbiome. The disease, for the purposes of the symptom, is inconsequential. It is consequential if it's a serious disease, but the symptoms you're experiencing is produced by the microbiome shifts. Some examples is if you go to my site and you go over here and you'll see a list of all sorts of conditions which have microbiome shifts associated. Let's take a look for what you are probably most interested in, which is that for autism. For autism, we have studies reporting a whole bunch of different bacteria shifts being reported. Now, with all scientific studies, you have to be careful because one study will say one thing and the next study will say something else. For example, let's take a look at something like Lactobacillus, which most of you probably know because it's common in many probiotics, and if people suggest you take probiotics, they're actually encouraging you to increase your Lactobacillus. We have 3 studies saying with autism we have high levels, and in 2 studies we say we have low levels. Now, I attempt to be open source about everything so that I'm not saying, oh, this is the way it is. What I'm saying is this is what is reported from a study. You may agree with it or disagree with it. That's fine. Don't argue with me about it's being wrong. All I'm doing is reporting facts reported in a study which appears on PubMed. If you are here and you go and you click on source, it will take you over to the documentation, what article appears to full classic academic citation. So this is for the high, and if I go back and I take a look at the low one, and we have another one. The reason results may be different is because of the selection criteria. They may be looking for people with autism in certain age ranges or in a certain additional characteristic, severe or mild, and the result is with those change of symptoms, there can be a change of the microbiome, which of course makes things a little bit complicated because you don't have a simple magic answer. Now, if you go back and look at another thing which you probably be familiar with, which is Bifidobacterium, and here we see we have a whole bunch of studies. One reports high, everybody else reports low. So we probably suspect that most of the time there's a low amount of Bifidobacterium. But for some subsets, it may actually be high. So if we flip back and look at the page before, you can then see all sorts of other conditions from high blood pressure, Graves' disease, fibromyalgia, depression, Crohn's disease, brain trauma, which you do not expect to cause a change in gut bacteria, does have changes of gut bacteria. Asthma, which you generally assume with the lungs, but it does affect the bacteria, and basically the chemicals being produced by the gut exasperates or calms down asthma, as the case be. Alzheimer's is getting more and more cited in publications that it is shifts of bacteria that cause it. During one of my chronic fatigue episodes, I had a SPECT scan, and the radiologist read it as my having early Alzheimer's disease because my brain had been altered by the gut bacteria so much that it was almost a match for early Alzheimer's. It wasn't early Alzheimer's. I understood at that point of time that my brain scan was off because my metabolites into my body was off because my gut was off. So I proceeded to address the root cause, the gut bacteria, and cognitive issues and memory and executive functions returned quite strongly. And all of that was before I produced this lovely website full of more information than you possibly want. Okay, so that gives you a very quick introduction. Now, the site has a lot of things which are absolutely free, like for example, all of that information, but there's also enhanced features which require you to log in first to be able to access it. To set yourself up for login is a very trivial process. Go over to login, go down here, enter in your email address. Click that, and that will now send you an email which will allow you to log into the site. And if we wait a few minutes, the email will arrive, and right here comes the email, and it has a link here which will allow you to log into the site. So if you click on the link, and I just copied it for ease, it will give you a unique key which is you and will allow you to log into the site as you are, which gives you additional features open up. So here it is. I happen to have on the site already a whole bunch of samples from a variety of microbiome tests, but that's not to be too concerned about that. What we're going to do is go and look up a modifier for specific conditions, and this is like the last page, except I'm expanded it to be more consolidated with all the key information on one page. So for example, for autism, I'll click that, and we have 3 major sections for each one of them if there's information available. The first one is the things which are reported in studies on humans to help a percentage of people with autism. For example, let's take a look at racetam, which is a lovely nootropic. If I click that, it will take me over to the bibliography. Because I'm logged in, I now have links to take me to the studies. For example, if I take a look at that study and click here, and there's the study, and I can proceed to read about the study from which I got information. Some cases we'll go over to the actual publication, and what we were looking at is Parasidium, and it says here is described as a novel therapy for autism and describe the result of using it. So that means we have the list of things which were studied on actual human beings. Second list is a list of the bacteria shift seen, just as we saw from the prior page, with a citation. But again, if you go to the citation, there it is, there's the link, so I can go and read the link. So it's all sitting there nicely. Down at the bottom is something which is unique to this site because it's basically unpublished research. I've worked as a data scientist basically for about 40 years. I've been programming for 50. And what it is we have had over 1,000 people upload the microbiome profiles, detailed microbiome, what I refer to as 16S style. And they also have added in the symptoms or medical conditions they have. From that information, I pop it into a machine learning algorithm, and the result of which we have the bacteria which are associated. For example, here we have Bifidobacterium is low level. There's only one result for Bifidobacterium, period, because machine learning is set up to come back with one result only, and it's low, which agrees with 5 out of the 6 samples which we had up above. If you take a look down here, we see Lactobacillus gets low level. Remember that one was free low and too high. So from the samples uploaded, we came to the same conclusion, and the relative strength is here. The higher the number, the more the machine logic indicates that this is a probable relationship. If we click on one of these bacteria, such as, let's go up and do Akkermansia, it will take you over to a page that gives you nothing but information on Akkermansia. There are literally thousands of pages on bacteria. And it will show you the name of companies that provide 16S testing, how often it gets a reading in their lab results. For example, we have American Gut. We have had 21 samples. 80% of them has it listed as a bacteria. We have Biome View. We have 33 samples, but all of them has it as a bacteria. There's differences of what different microbiome testing sites report, and that's a whole different kettle of fish, which I won't drill into it. We now have down below, we have what are the end products, the chemicals that this particular bacteria is reported to produce. We have additional links to external sites to provide additional information, and you can just click that and get more information. Again, lots of information. Everything is linked, which means you can disappear and be reading for the whole weekend without realizing it. And now down below we have a chart showing the variety of samples. So we have a chart showing, okay, here is what people have. I can go up and say, okay, that's nice, but my lab result is from Biome site, and that shows the value there. I'm doing log values because that makes it almost a straight line. If I flip it over to value per million, you see a very different shape of chart, and it's subject to site misinterpretation because the log values is actually better for interpreting than the raw numbers. So we have it there because, as you can see here, it's pretty flat and goes up, but here is where we have dramatic change, which means the bottom 10 percentile is where there should be concern. If you have samples, I happen to have a lot, you'll find all of them on the chart so you know exactly where your particular value is sitting in terms of everybody else. Generally between 10% and 90% is a don't worry about it. You are pretty close to normal. It's when you get in the top 9% or the bottom 9% that we probably should consider taking actions from it. Then from citizen science down below, we have things which are associated with it, either low value or a high value. And I only give you 100 entries. These are pair of symptoms. For example, inability to tolerate an upright position, and alcohol intolerance is associated with low levels. You can see that low levels of Akkermansia by itself is associated with a large number of conditions. Generally, it is a combination of different bacteria that produce the condition. Which combinations are, it's a little bit trickier to do. So that will give you what symptoms tend to be associated with it. And then you get from published science saying, okay, what things, for example, autism, we have 2 cases where it is associated. We have 2 studies, and if you again click on the link, you will see the study and can read the details of it. And then down at the below, we have a list of things that will impact this particular bacteria for the better or for the worse. Suppose you want to deal only with herbs. A lot of those are prescription drugs. So you just do herb there, and now you have it. And if you want to determine things to decrease it, you have the list there. If you want to have things that increases, you got 4 things exactly, and 2 of them happens to be alternative classification. So we ended up with only 3 things, which is Prenala, sunflower, and a Chinese herbal. Everything else decreases it. So those are things, if you're trying to increase Akkermansia, you probably want to avoid. And again, if you go over here and you click increases from one study, it will take you to where we get the information from. Okay, so let's back ourselves up a bit. And we now have more information. But the problem is, okay, but what about me? Or what about my loved one? What does this state? There's 2 ways of going about it. One is the 16S studies, which there are 4 or 5 companies that will do it, and keyword, and produce reports that can be used on this system. There are other companies who will say, we'll do all the analysis of you, etc., give you a PDF, and you probably won't have the details of why their suggestions are coming from. In some cases, their suggestions, I hate to say it, all canned cookbook explanations. I know one company does custom probiotics. Basically, they have 5 different probiotics mixtures, and they will pick one of those, and that's customized for yourself. It's not a specific to you. It's that you fall into sort of one of 5 buckets, and that buckets they happen to have probiotics for, and they say it's customized. So just tries to take it to the next level, the next degree of absolutely being specific, but not only being specific, but being specific with complete traceability as to how those suggestions were made, which means that, okay, you can go through and agree or disagree to your heart's content, accept or reject. Okay, let's go in. If you go over to other lab analysis, you'll find there's a whole bunch of labs here. All of these are labs which do not provide a detailed microbiome analysis. In fact, most of them only measure a handful of bacteria. Typical 16S analysis sits around 800 to 2400 different bacteria are reported. Let's take a look at one of them. Let's take a look at day 2. And here we have the list. It's a very good list. If we go back and take a look at de novo GI effects, we have a shorter list. In fact, some of them are down to 8 or 9. So they produce a report which generally send you as a PDF, and now you have to put the information in. They also give you a scale. It's about a high, low, very high, or very low. So what you have to do is you have to translate it to being low, or being very high, or number 1 high, a number 1 high. Let's suppose we have autoimmune supporters, and we have that one being low. So you transcribe information from your paper or PDF report rather than doing upload, and then you go and you click analysis. The analysis takes you to actually a tuning page. The tuning page gives you choices of what you want to see for suggestions. Keyword is these are suggestions. These are not prescriptions. These are suggestions of things you should try, things which have a higher probability of having a positive result than things at random. All of them have a logical reason for selecting it because, for example, we have studies showing that they reduce some of those bacteria which you have already indicated. On the flip side, some substances may increase some of those in the right way and take others the wrong way, so that there's a balancing act. And the program attempts by machine learning and actually fuzzy AI, to be more precise, to come up with suggestions based on the combination of the bacteria and a combination of the modifiers and try finding what would be the optimal combination. So you can come in and you can set the levels of bacteria you want. Now, most people don't know very much about the fact that bacteria are in levels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my sample page. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and I have something called my Biome View, which will be done for everybody who does a 16S sample. And give us a few seconds and it should hopefully show up. And there it is. And what we have here is you can see the hierarchy going up and down. So let's go down to something which we are familiar with, like Lactobacillus. And the general group actually consists of Lactobacillus, but related to them is Lactococcus as well as Streptococcus. All of these are lactic acid producing bacteria. And if you take a look there, you see a lot of red. When this sample was done, I was suffering cognitive issues, and a common cause for cognitive issues is too much lactic acid. So I had a large number of bacteria that was producing a large volume of lactic acid, so we're having cognitive problems. So we have here, which is a strain. Up above a strain is a genus. Above the genus is the family, etc. So when we are over on this page, you can say, okay, we only want low information, not higher information. There's advantages about going to a low level is that you are trying to target very specific bacteria, which has particular characteristics. The higher up you go, the more fuzzy it comes as to what works or doesn't work, or if you have a problem or don't have a problem. Now, in this case, I could go with no restrictions, and it will show me suggestions of what I should or not should or should not be taking, items to increase, items to decrease. Basically, for example, I have wheat there. I may or may not have gluten-free. Sometimes that shows up, sometimes it doesn't. But it means I should reduce wheat in there. I should probably be working with these two probiotics, rosemary, curcumin, pomegranate, etc. But now if I go back to the original one and say, okay, let's go and state I am interested only in bacteria associated with autism using citizen science. I just change that, click, again it opens up into a new thing, and notice the list of modifiers change, because although I had perhaps 8 bacteria there, only 4 of them are associated with autism. The other we will view, at least for the moment, as being noise. So we're not going to pay attention to the noise, we're just going to deal with things connected with autism. And down below we have the list, and you notice that wheat isn't sitting high on the list. Down below that we have a list of probiotics which will have a positive impact. We have probiotics which have mixed impact. Usually mixed impact I do not recommend taking, because we don't know if the actual bottom line is positive or negative. The take and avoid numbers here are indicating how many studies or how many of the bacteria act in a favorable way and how many of them act in an unfavorable way, but it does not measure the magnitude of the effect. All it does is indicate the number of studies, which is the best we have to work from, because we do not have studies indicating relative magnitude. So all we can do is we can do a approximation by saying, okay, how many studies say yes or how many says no, and we know it's a toss-up. Hence, if you can do something which is absolutely positive, where there are no studies saying adverse effect, that's the one you want. because you have the least risk with the current knowledge base. And then you have ones which are no known impact, and you also have ones which are you may also have ones which are unfavorable in some cases, and ones which, if you're taking, please stop, you're probably making the condition worse. Down below we have Fibrinoid Foods, which are types of foods which you should be eating. They may not be included in the list above, or they may be. What it is that often studies indicates that a particular flavonoid helps, but doesn't say which food it comes from. So the result is just as a lookup table saying, okay, here's the flavonoid, here's the food associated with, so probably these are the foods you should eat. And down below we have the actual flavonoid suggested. If you click on one of them, like resveratrol, you will find out what it comes in which case it's only found in raw cranberries, which is probably why many people buy the supplements instead, or fructose, which is in a bunch of things, very high in raisins and grapes, etc. So it gives you the link. Information is not 100% complete. It's using the best data I'm being able to obtain, which I can extract and import into the database easily. So it is incomplete, but it's there. So we can go back and we can say we want certain things or we don't want certain things. For example, let's go over to the published science. So we're treating the same thing, but we are using a different set of bacterial filters that came from someplace else. I know you want it to be one simple answer. It's not. It's messy. It's complicated. This system gives you the choices to make, and you really, most people, you don't want to have choices to make. You want a nice, simple canned answer. This won't give you a canned answer. It will give you the tools to get suggestions. Again, the real key is to go and get the suggestions, and for suggestions, try things one at a time to find out what helps or what doesn't help. For example, Lactobacillus casei is a high probability of helping, and we saw that on the prior screen, so probably that is a good one. It's reoccurring. Things to stop being is don't be a vegetarian, but at the same time don't go on a high-fat diet. Again, these are relatively low values, and the ones which are higher values are the ones which you should tend to favor, mainly because the odds are better. Keyword is odds. These are suggestions. These are probable things that will help. None of it is guaranteed. Okay, so that's it for dealing with our lab analysis. There's a SAC there. If you have a lab like that, which is a short list, as in no more than 20 or 25 different bacteria, and it's on the list, then you may be able to do it by either of these two choices, which gives you a pretty long list. Believe me, the list is long. If you try doing it by genus, you can see it goes on and on and on and on and on. It's complete, but it is a lot of data to transcribe. Now, the better thing is if you have a item coming from any of these people, you can upload them directly into the site. And Biome site does direct transfer, which means if you have them do the processing, they actually give you a button on their screen which will ship your data from their screen and their site to my site automatically, so you have nothing to do. Nice and simple, nice and clean. Rose over Biome site has been a gem in getting it working and testing it. So that's it. But otherwise, if you go over and go back to samples, you will find that you have quick suggestions, which is if you basically design for somebody who wants quick answers, good suggestions, but without any of the qualifications all over the place. And this comes from ranges of bacteria which a naturopath in Tasmania has put together. He teaches worldwide. He has a 2-year waiting list for new patients. So He's well respected. I've heard him talk. I met him in person. Good chap. So he has produced a combination I've got a permission to use. His benchmarks for what levels, what ranges certain things should be in, and thereby it takes those ranges, applies the fuzzy AI to come up with suggestions as to what probiotics and everything. So this is for taking whatever you put in and moving towards a general healthy person. It is again designed as a quick suggestion list for people who don't want to start getting into the complexity or learning the complexities of dealing with the microbiome. We have advanced suggestions. Advanced suggestion is just like the one we had before. You give a variety of choices. For example, if I do 0% here and ask for suggestions, it'll come up with suggestions. But if you go back and put in autism, hoping it repeats itself, it comes up with nothing, because taking my list of bacteria shifts, but only those at 3% above or below, and saying only those which also associated with autism, there's no bacteria left. So there's no suggestions to make. So that's something to keep in mind. If alternatively I go back to 9% and ask, I get suggestions. If I go back and suppose I wanted I was dealing with high lactic acid, which is what we saw from the Biome View earlier, and we ask for that one, it will filter it only by lactic acid producing and comes back with a list of things to do with all of the mixed impact. Notice there's nothing which should take. In fact, mixed impact, there's a lot of things which have bacteria in it, which are Lactobacillus, and you already have high Lactobacillus, and then you got a horrendous list of negative ones. There's nothing good can be said about that. Then we have a few which we don't know anything about. For example, Lactobacillus brevis powder is a weak or non-producer of lactic acid, so it wasn't included for things to avoid. We have foods to try. We have things to do it. Oh, caffeine. Speaking of which, hey, I'm eating according to my own health, or drinking according to my own health recipe. So you can go down, again, niacin, B12, folic acid, chronic fatigue syndrome. Those are almost always show up for people with chronic fatigue syndrome as recommendation. And more importantly, most studies show they actually help. So it's interesting that working from the microbiome, knowing nothing about the person's medical conditions, you end up with recommendations which corresponds to the current best knowledge for things to help with the actual medical conditions they have. It gets a bit, it gets a bit odd at times to find that things seem to jive so much. I have had people put in their samples and then click probable symptoms, which is a option on the there, and if you go along probable symptoms, it will go and using the machine learning attempt to come up with the probable symptoms. In this case, we see, well, some cases it's off, but that's often is because there's another group that has almost the same match. 60 to 70 blurred vision at this point in time. I was having some irritable bowel, yes. Overbody intolerance, yes. POTS, yes. Aching of muscles, yes. Physically draining or sick after mild activity, yes. So it did a pretty good hit for it. But there's 61 things there, and if you go to the last page, We still have one there. So if I want to go for lower significance, which can actually will get ugly, this is how to control how well things need to match. And we go down and we see, what do we have? We have 1781 symptom combination matches. That is a lot. Some of them you see is very low, others are whatever. You again, the matching is matching for patterns which other people or other combinations may also have a similar pattern. So it simply tries doing it. The higher the number of taxonomy matches and the number in the pattern, higher it is, the more reliable it is. And the lower the number, the less reliable it is. So that's basically it. Okay, I'm just about done. Again, you can select what you want for bacteria or for your modifiers. For example, if I say, okay, I want to do antibiotics and let's forget about foods, Fibrinoid Foods, let's do it there. I don't care about different types of sugars. I don't care about mineral or vitamins. And I click here. And it will come up with, in this case, it comes up with the best items being a whole bunch of antibiotics, particular ones. But none of them are particularly good. One is the high magic number. And what we find is the first thing, number one, I think is to stop, is inulin, which is a prebiotic. Another prebiotic is also there. Specific probiotics are suggested. CLA, which is often used for chronic fatigue syndrome, is not suggested. Juice artichoke, which is almost inulin, depends on the processing of it. So it gives you a bunch of information. Where the information comes from can be traced back, but it quickly becomes a exploding nest of links because there's a lot of information there. How much information? Okay, let's look at the quick current data summary. Okay, so you can see we have 1,329 samples. We have, in terms of bacteria, for what is in our database, let's go up and look at species. We have 9,000 different species that could be reported on. 9,000. We have, in terms of end product to bacteria relationship, we have 8,000. This particular bacteria produces this particular end product or metabolites, such as lactic acid or histamine. Medical conditions to bacteria association, we have just about 5,000. This comes from published articles from PubMed specifying certain bacteria were found high or low. We have, in terms of modifiers to bacteria, we have, I hate to say, we have over 1 million different relationships in our database, which we make use of to try finding the ideal combination. We have 660 people who have done uploads. We have 1,900 different bacteria, different food to modify, and so that means we end up with a fairly good number of associations for every bacteria, and we have 210 probiotic mixtures there. So if you are interested in probiotics, you can go down and look at contents of probiotic mixtures, and it will go and give you the names of all sorts of different commercial probiotics, tells you what is in there, will give you some information about it. For example, is it a lactic acid producer? Is it produces histamine? Those are the two biggest things that many people who take probiotics encounter problems. Either too much lactic acid produced or they are histamine sensitive, and this probiotic or that probiotic suddenly has them breaking out in hives. Not fun. Okay, so you have a rich site with lots of information. easy to register to get the advanced features. Advanced features are features which I've added in this year, all of the older stuff being out there, and that will say being available without needing to log in. You need to log in to access the new stuff. I'm trying to actually implement a business model to basically I'm footing the bill for everything myself, all the websites. So I'm trying to sort of do a bit of cost recovery, which is not unexpected. But that's basically it. If you discover something which I seem to be missing, put the link to it, put in the comment, and just click there. And that will record what page you're on and information, and I will review them periodically and update the page so you can contribute to making the site better if you wish. Just give me the URL where you get information, describe what it is, and I know by you clicking what page it's on. So that's basically it. And I think that's about it. If you are interested, there's more stuff there. I could keep talking for a few more hours on it. Explorers, we just have tons of stuff there. I'll shut up and tell you to go sign up, get the login, explore, consider getting a 16S type test, the two which are recommended, especially if you are in Europe. Biomesite.com, which is a UK site, deals with all of Europe, and they are very friendly and cooperative. If you use that site, make sure you enter a discount code called MICRO, which is a discount code they issue to my site, and you'll get something like 20% off the price. Or thrivealive.com, which is an American site. If you're in Europe or elsewhere, sometimes you can find that the transport costs getting them to and from, and in some cases paying duty to get it into Europe, is painful on the pocketbook. So Biomesite is the preferred one for all Europeans. Australia is a bit of a mess. They do have microbiome testing site, and I'm still trying to get uploadable uploads from them so that I can incorporate their data, and hopefully I'll be able to do an announcement about that sometime in the near future. Okay, I'm going to shut up. I'm a former teacher of mathematics, computer science, general science, university instructor, so I do have a tendency to keep talking on and on and on and on. So I'll shut up now and tell you to go and explore.